Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Blaster bolts whizzed past CT-7791's head as he charged down the corridor. He raised his DC-15S and fired back in turn, landing a headshot on his droid opponent. The droid's head was blasted clean off and sparks flew from its neck as it collapsed. Alongside 4 other clones, he reached the end of the hall and, without hesitation, blasted the locking mechanism on the door that stood in his way. He and his squad mates charged through, emerging in a large elevator control room. There were nearly 3 dozen battle droids in that room, mostly standard B1 units with a few B2s sprinkled into the mix. The clones opened fire before the droids noticed them and ducked for cover when the droids fired back. Only 4 of them made it. As they returned fire, other doors to the room opened and a steady trickle of clones began to flow into the place. Droids were caught off guards from multiple angles and they had all been destroyed before the clones had even finished charging in. CT-7791, or 91 as his batches had called him, took the opportunity to remove his helmet and take a breath. He, as with the others in the room, was a galactic marine, and their gear reflected it. Unlike with standard clone helmets, 91's was faced with a mesh screen similar to those used as part of Blizzard adapted standard armor. He looked down at it as he caught his breath, noting points where the mesh had been scorched by near misses. He found no outright breaches, as so, he put his helmet down and began maintenance on his blaster carbine instead. All around him, the other men in his company were doing the same. Not one of them spoke, focusing intently on their tasks and taking a minute to rest from the stresses of combat. Some were wounded, none of them seemed to care. They were used to it, all of them. Battle and bleeding had become a way of life for them over the past year, more so than for the other clones that were constantly being thrown into the grinder of war on planets across the galaxy at that moment. With his DC now reloaded, 91 turned to the elevator room's sole window, a large panoramic view that wrapped around a portion of the exterior wall. It was unbroken, a rare sight nowadays, he mused. He looked out it over the ruins of a large industrial city, its grey buildings all damaged in some manner or other. Here and there, clusters of tents could be seen, over which the red flag of the Republic waved. The sun was just beginning to rise. Before the war, beings of a variety of species would have been leaving for work at this point in time. But the city was almost entirely abandoned by the civilian populace. Nearly all of the locals had fled long ago. As the planet's sun shot its first rays over the distant mountains, one of the other troopers finally spoke.
Day 365, men. We've been here for a full year.
The announcement was met with silence.
A full year?
91 mused to himself. For 365 days, he had been stationed on Mygeeto, fighting the forces of the intergalactic banking clan as they sought to defend their most prized stronghold. A year ago, the Republic had invaded in hopes of making headways into the swath of space controlled by the IGBC in that region. A year later, the battle was still in a state of stalemate. 91's musing was interrupted when the captain entered the room at last. At once, all of the clones turned and stood at attention. Captain Valko, the leader of 91's battalion, wore the same style of armor as the rest of them, with the addition of a Kama battle skirt and a pauldron. He had led the company for 5 months now, having been promoted to command when the original captain was killed. As far as commanding officers go, 91 thought he was probably in the better half. Valko wasted no time in addressing his men.
We're nearly there, men. The command center is somewhere on the floor above, the top floor. This building's nearly ours.
One of 91's squad mates muttered over the captain as he continued.
Yeah, we bought the damn place with half a company's worth of men.
The captain ignored him.
Our losses have been severe, but we can finally take this place if we give this one last push our all. Now, the elevators are out, so we're going to have to scale the shaft, but that shouldn't be too hard. It's just a floor up. This is a textbook maneuver, and when it's through, we're just clearing rooms until we hit the command center. Now, let's move.
The remnants of the company split up at the bank of the elevators that lined the wall, and troopers began forcing open the doors. 91 and the remnants of his squad joined with what used to be another squad, combining to a total of 8 men. The group's corporal went first when the doors opened, climbing up to the doors on the level above, applying a breach charge and quickly dropping back down as the charge did its job, blowing the elevator doors clean off. Then he climbed right back up, and the rest of the group followed. A squad of droids was waiting for them, and the room in which the elevator had emerged had already been converted into a defense position. Their opening volley killed the corporal, and they killed 2 other clones as well before the remaining 5 wiped them out. Silently, they made their way to the other end of the room, where the only other door stood. 91 and 3 others crouched on one side of the door as the 5th trooper blew the lock. As the door opened, 91 tossed a grenade in, and when it blew, the clones charged in. The droids that escaped the blast were quickly picked off as the Marines stormed the room, making for the corners and the 2 doors leading out of it. As they paused, they could hear similar scenarios playing out all over that floor of the tower as the company began a full assault. One of 91's squad mates signaled the rest of the men over to one of the doors.
This one's unlocked. Either we're off course or the other side's well defended.
91 knew the implications of the latter scenario well.
If it's case 2, that means we're right on target. We don't have much choice.
The debate ended there. The first trooper opened the door and tossed a grenade in, catching the first squad of battle droids unprepared and scattering their pieces all over the room. As the dust settled, the other clones charged in, only for more blaster bolts to tear through the smoke. One of the men was hit, and the others instinctively fired back at the target. The target kept shooting, and the smoke faded away to reveal that they were up against a super battle droid. Another of 91's squad mates went down, and the other 2 ducked behind cover. The super battle droid focused on them, turning its wrist-mounted blasters on the crate that they were crouched behind and opening fire. 91 took the opportunity as he saw it. He rushed the droid behind and stuck his carbine right into the heat exchangers on its back. Before the droid could process it, 91 unloaded a full clip into it, downing it at last.
Good shots,
mused one of the remaining clones as they got out from behind the crate, stepping over the bodies of their fallen comrades as they came to the door. This one was larger and heavier than those that had come before, and blaster fire could be heard on the other side. 91 had an immediate bad feeling that he could interpret immediately.
That's it. The command center's on the other side.
One of his squad mates whipped out his last grenade and closed in.
Then it's now or never.
But before the clones could begin a door breach, the door opened on its own. A second super battle droid marched through, fresh from the battle that was raging beyond in what was indeed the enemy command center. It opened fire, blasting 91's squad mate in the face at point blank range, shredding his helmet and the head behind it. 91 and his remaining comrade raised their rifles, but they didn't need to. A clone within the command center downed it from behind, allowing the 2 clones to charge right in. The command center was situated in what had once been a penthouse apartment, with wide views of the entire city. There must have been a full platoon of droids stationed there originally, though by this point there were under 20 of them left, 2 B2s and a swarm of B1s. The bodies of both droids and clones littered the room as the rest of the company attacked, with Captain Valko right in the thick of things. The tactical droid in charge of the building was present as well, firing at Valko with a blaster pistol from behind a command desk. 91 jabbed his squad mate with his elbow and pointed to the droid.
We've got a clear avenue of attack. Let's go.
The 2 clones opened fire on the tactical droid's position, downing the droids that were guarding it before turning their blasters on the tactical droid itself. 91 landed a shot on the droid's shoulder, causing it to whirl around and fire right back at him. He evaded the shots, but his squad mate wasn't so lucky. 2 bolts hit him, and suddenly 91 was a one-man squad. He retaliated immediately and this time took off the tactical droid's head. It collapsed in a shower of sparks, and 91 turned to the other droids, only to realize that none were left. A silence fell as the victorious clones waded through the wreckage of the command center, examining computer consoles or downed droids. There were under a dozen men left out of the entire company. Earlier in the battle, this would have been a cause for grief, but by this point, the survivors had become numb even to that. Replacements would arrive and they would die just as the others had. Soon enough, the survivors of this battle would become the casualties of the next. As Clone Trooper CT-7791 mused about this, he cast a glance through the shattered windows of the command center. This one gave him a clear look at the Separatist-controlled side of the city, a side just as ruined and miserable as the Republic's. Dozens of tall buildings rose over the rubble, skyscrapers that the enemy had turned into fortresses. As 91 examined what would likely be his next set of targets, he noted that they all looked just like the building that he had just taken. So guys, that was our interpretation of a soldier's perspective in the Battle of Mygeeto. And as with all of these story videos, this is not based on any canonical fact, and we just infer these stories from the information available. So essentially, the story is made up, but it is based on truth as well. And before you go, I want to thank everybody who made this possible, including my writer, Grievous1138, and the man that does all the epic clone voices that you hear, Frankster5261. So be sure to send them a message of support on Discord if you enjoyed what they've helped create. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.